Welcome back to another exciting episode of Healthy Happy Hour. I'm Dr. Angela Berg here at Care for the Kids. I am joined today by my good friend Chanelle, who is our leader extraordinaire and supervisor of our research team and having a very important job here. I'm very excited for you to join me for us to talk about research today. And so on a recent episode, we talked a little bit about research with Dr. Raul and talked about the CAR T-cell therapy that is coming. But I thought you and I would just share some of the conversations we've had about the importance of research. And let's talk first, very basic. I think people still think that when we talk about research, that we're talking about experimenting, and we obviously don't support experimenting on our children here. So can you talk a little bit about, in research terms, how we differentiate that research is not experimenting on our kids?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk a lot about research and its importance in society. So first of all, experimentation, when we talk about what is an experiment, it is using scientific methods to test a hypothesis. And when we talk about clinical research, we're referring to working with patients on the development of new therapies, new medications, new procedures, and medical devices. So that's just one important distinction between the two. When we talk about clinical research, of course, we're talking about different regulations. Federal regulations, local and state regulations come into play. We're incorporating various sponsors and research organizations and sites like Care for the Kids as well to come up with a clinical trial.
Good point. And so really the experiment and the hypothesis is oftentimes years before the clinical research comes. So what we're actually doing with clinical research, when you talk about us developing therapies, is us really determining what perfect combinations maybe work for our kids and coming up with and developing perfect protocols for maximizing our outcomes. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Am I saying that right, you think?
Yeah,
I want to make sure I'm saying it right. We obviously, in oncology care, it is where most of these research and protocols live in healthcare. Experiments are at those labs at the National Institute of Health, for example, with sometimes on paper, then starting on mice. That's where the experiments lie. You talked about the regulations that go into play, and I think there is a lot of history that probably people don't know about differentiating where the experimenting stops and the clinical research starts is why we have so many of those regulations. We have some history. Will you talk a little bit about the training that providers and people dealing with clinical research and medicine have to go through to make sure that the utmost transparency and integrity is sustained while research is happening?
Absolutely. So one of the main trainings that we do here at Care for the Kids, and all of our clinic staff does this, not just including our research staff, it's good clinical practices, and we do a city certification for it. In good clinical practice, it's basically like the backbone of clinical research. Everyone needs to have that certification before you can be involved in clinical research in any way. It's basically a set of regulations, federal regulations and guidances on how to maintain patient safety, ensure regulatory compliance, remain ethical on clinical trials, and protecting data integrity as well. So a very long list of regulations, but we know them here, we preach them here, we follow them very closely, and its main job is to protect patient safety. And it's one of those things we incorporate into all of our clinical trials. We write all of our SOPs in guidance with our GCP, Good Clinical Practice, that's just a shortened term for it. And we make sure all of our staff is trained. We also retrain very regularly as well on it. So anytime there's a new regulation that comes out, recently they they did update that GCP, and so we're making sure that we're all up to date on that as well.
Good point, good point. I think everybody kind of knows by now that one of the most important things to us at Cure for the Kids is to be on the cutting edge. I mean, our very mission is to be providing care today and making sure that we're improving care for tomorrow. So let's talk a little bit about why when people talk, with social media being so rampant and it's so easy for misinformation to be out there and people to not be able to differentiate between, I think it's important for people to understand that a case of one person, we would refer to it as an N of one. So what happens with one person is not necessarily a good practice to infer that outcome or that result to everyone. Let's talk a little bit about that, because you and I have had some discussions before about the risk that it puts to people, because even you and I are genetically very different. Obviously, my blonde hair, blue eyes with your dark complexion and brown eyes. We're going to have differences in how we respond to things. So kind of talk about the importance of achieving a good number of outcomes, and maybe even the ability for the results to be duplicated or replicated in order for us to really trust in that data.
Sure. So when we focus on like the phase 1 through 3 clinical trials that we conduct here, there's a gigantic team that helps create those trials. And there's biostatisticians. They're very much responsible for coming up with what sort of demographics does need to be included in these trials. How many patients do we need on a trial for statistically significant results? And that's how our sponsored trials, all of our investigational trials run. So those things are predetermined, and it is determined based on preclinical research, phase 1 trials, before it even goes to trials that need hundreds of people on it. And we try our best to have an array of different people that could be on trials so that we can have more accurate results at the end of it. If a trial does not meet its statistical significance, then it doesn't get approved. So that's something to note, is that in order for it to pass its FDA approvals, it must be statistically significant, and it should show some bit of its hypothesis being proven. Other thing to note too is you are correct that it can still respond differently to people. Trials take many years to complete. They've got, aside from just the phase 3 trials, they have all the preclinical testing that needs to be done. So trials can span many, many years before it even reaches approval stages. But even aside from that, there's phase 4 clinical trials, and those are going to be post-market trials where the medication has been approved, it is out in the public, and that's where you collect the data on people who are taking those trials. Now we move on to observational type trials, where people can consent to share how has their indications or diseases and such progressed over the years of taking a certain medication. And all that data is still being analyzed even years after a clinical trial. That way, if a new adverse event pops up, a new side effect of a medication pops up, we can catch that and we can update that information as needed.
I think that's one of probably the most important safety features of making sure that clinical research continues to be supported, because if nobody were collecting that information, it would take a long time for negative impacts to be known to everyone if there is no central clearinghouse, if you will, for that information. And I think people, rather than being afraid of clinical research, don't understand how important it is to all of our safety in the long term for being able to monitor these things more closely. I also wanted to just ask you, what has been, you think, your greatest, well, maybe let's do it this way. What has been the thing that most attracted you to go into working in research?
Just the impact it has on everyone. I mean, as I said before, there's so many people involved in just one clinical trial. You're not alone if you're a patient on a trial. You have many other patients also on this trial who have a similar situation to you. You have many doctors, study coordinators looking at your information, making sure you remain safe on the trial, because that is utmost priority. You have so many regulatory bodies that are checking in on clinical trials, making sure that we meet our goals, making sure that we comply with the GCP principles, making sure we keep trials ethical, and again, data integrity. So we've got biostatisticians that are constantly checking that information. We can see if a medication isn't working for you based on what sort of side effects you're having, whether it's an outlier. Your results are an outlier based on the general results that are being collected as well, and what does that mean for one person on a trial. But it has such a significant impact on different diseases. There's especially rare genetic diseases that don't have a lot of medications that are out there just yet. It's very new research. We're learning a lot as we progress with the different medications being released. We're learning about the disease progression itself in real time. And it helps those who don't have other options, who don't have other medications out yet, who genetic therapy maybe hasn't yet been approved for their condition. So it's just all about helping people and getting access to different medications. It's all about making sure that they remain safe and we give them the best option possible.
I think that is such at the core of what we do at Cure for the Kids, and you certainly have the Cure for the Kids heart, and it shows, and we're blessed to have you leading this research program here. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your expertise with us. And thank you so much for submitting questions that tell us that the importance of hearing this information from Chanelle is what you needed to know, and continue to give us those comments and request that information from us. Meanwhile, if you appreciated the episode today, please hit that like button, subscribe, and join the channel. Hit your notifications to make sure you know about our future episodes. And we look forward to having you back very soon for more information here on Healthy Happy Hour. Stay healthy and stay healthy and stay happy, and we'll see you soon.
National